At 5 a.m., the horizon east of Pokrovsk was an iron line. Smoke rising in thin columns, fields churned into mud, and highways choked with abandoned vehicles. The town itself had become a focal point, a hard knot where advancing forces had met a determined defense. In the hours before dawn, a single cable sat humming through Ukrainian headquarters. Logistics were failing, ammunition stocks were measured by the hour, and civilian movement was effectively frozen. Commanders on both sides knew the theater had shifted from maneuver to siege. By first light, the encirclement was no longer a forecast. It was a fact. Positions to the north and west had closed, cutting the last dependable ground corridor that supplied the defenders. Artillery observers on the flanks had ringed the town in overlapping fires, creating a persistent belt of suppression anywhere a convoy might run. From the Ukrainian defensive perspective, the problem had two faces: firepower attrition and the political calculus of holding a populated town under siege. At 7:15 a.m., electronic chatter spiked. A message came down the chain. A formal ultimatum had been delivered. The language was simple and strategic. Surrender to preserve civilian lives and allow orderly withdrawal, or face continued encirclement and intensified bombardment. That ultimatum would shape decisions for commanders who were already balancing soldier safety, mission orders, and domestic political pressure. On the ground, the defenders faced a logistic geometry that is deadly in its simplicity. Fuel lines were constrained to two small routes. Engineers had set up temporary depots, but every resupply run had to thread past observation posts and counter-battery positions. Ammunition expenditures had tripled during the last 72 hours. Medics reported that casualty evacuation times had moved from tens of minutes to hours. In modern war, minutes and hours become bargaining chips. The Russian approach in that sector combined three discrete levers: encirclement, psychological pressure, and a calibrated show of force designed to minimize international outcry while increasing local cost. Patrols tightened the ring. Drones flew persistent circuits just beyond anti-air coverage, sending back imagery that allowed commanders to tailor threats and craft the ultimatum. The language of that message was tactical theater, framed as humanitarian concern, delivered with a military outline of consequences. That rhetorical shield has been used before. It lowers the political temperature while keeping pressure high. Inside the pocket, Ukrainian officers organized into three functional nodes: command, sustainment, and extraction planning. Command focused on target prioritization and civilian coordination. Sustainment assessed remaining stocks and prioritized defensive fires. Extraction planning rehearsed corridor openings and one-way egress windows. Every option required trade-offs. Open a corridor and risk an ambush. Hold tight and accept slow bleed on supplies. The choice was never purely military. It was logistical, legal, and moral. At 9 a.m., reconnaissance identified a narrow window along a secondary road, a potential route to ferry critical supplies in small convoys under darkness. Engineers estimated one night to prepare, remove obvious obstacles, mark a safe lane, and pre-position smoke and illumination to hide approach signatures. The plan was feasible, but the margin for error would be measured in tens of meters and seconds. If the maneuver failed, retreat could become rout. Communication discipline under siege is a force multiplier. Radios were forced to quiet modes. Common networks had been compromised or monitored. Commanders moved to localized nets, short bursts, and face-to-face liaison when possible. This degraded the tempo of operations, Orders that once propagated in seconds now took minutes. In the fog of siege, minutes swell into consequences. At 10:30 a.m., an intercepted signal suggested the adversary was preparing to reinforce observation posts around the town's southern approaches. That movement would shorten any supply corridor still further. The defenders had to act, and their options narrowed to three: attempt a staged breakout that evening, accept negotiated withdrawal under terms, or dig in for a protracted defense that would rely on external relief. Each path carried different costs and different risks to civilians sheltering inside the town. Staged breakouts are paradoxes of control. They require the defender to be both bold and surgical. The objective is not to punch a broad hole, but to create a narrow, controlled corridor, push a timed element through, then seal behind. Success depends on combined arms precision. Artillery suppresses known enemy hold points. Drones provide overwatch. Small units shepherd supply vehicles under smoke and ECM cover. Failure means vehicles are left exposed in kill zones. Negotiated withdrawal, by contrast, trades territory for lives. It relies on some degree of mutual restraint, on trust that terms will be honored, and on international mechanisms to observe compliance. In practice, trust is thin. Guarantees are provisional. But the political calculus, local governors, national leadership, and public opinion can weigh heavily in favor of saving civilians, even when it concedes strategic ground. By noon, decision time approached. The battalion commander called a council, company commanders, the brigade liaison, medical lead, and a representative of civil defense. They reviewed satellite imagery, ammunition burn rates, casualty trends, and the evacuation queue. Each brief was brutal and precise. The town's defense had bought time elsewhere on the front. Now that price had been paid, they set conditions. If reinforcements or aerial resupply did not materialize within 18 hours, they would open negotiations to secure organized civilian evacuation and an orderly withdrawal of combat units. If the enemy attempted to storm the town or refused talks while pushing a fresh encirclement line, the order would toggle to an immediate night breakout. Those were not pleasant choices. They were plans of survival in which doctrine met human cost. The commanders knew their decision would be scrutinized on return, both by their superiors and by a public for whom symbolic resistance meant something deeper than operational logic. At 4 p.m. hours, the outer perimeter of Pokrovsk fell silent. The artillery that had hammered the town for days eased into sporadic bursts, a sign both sides recognized as the prelude to negotiation. A drone orbiting above transmitted the quiet geometry of the battlefield. Roads empty, armor concealed, soldiers crouched in shadow, waiting for someone else to speak first. The Ukrainian commander used that silence. He ordered every unit to hold fire, to prepare for two outcomes: a corridor agreement or renewed assault. Engineers laid smoke markers along the southern edge, the line identified for a possible breakout, while communications officers opened a single secure channel for talks. Messages passed in short-coded bursts, every word weighed, every pause calculated. At 5:40 p.m., the Russian ultimatum arrived again, this time relayed over open frequencies so that every headset in the pocket could hear it. It promised safe treatment for those who surrendered, medical care for wounded, and evacuation for civilians. It was accompanied by a thin veil of threat. Continued resistance would result in precision strikes until organized defense ceased. For the men inside Pokrovsk, that phrase meant total destruction. No one answered immediately. In command posts lit by flickering lamps, officers debated in whispers. Tactical pride wrestled with arithmetic. Ammunition was down to single digits per tube. Diesel tanks read nearly empty. The medical station was operating on generator fumes. Every calculation led to the same conclusion. The battle was already lost in logistics. At 6:30 p.m., the brigade commander radioed Kiev with his final assessment. He reported that the defensive mission had achieved its delay objective. Russian advances elsewhere had stalled while Pokrovsk held. He requested authorization to negotiate surrender terms focused on civilian extraction and wounded evacuation. The acknowledgement came 10 minutes later. 2 words only. Proceed carefully. As dusk settled, white flares rose above the southern ridge, the agreed signal to suspend fire. A convoy of armored ambulances rolled slowly toward the Russian line, followed by a truck carrying wounded soldiers under medical flags. Cameras recorded the scene from a distance, though no one spoke. After 3 years of grinding war, another town had reached its limit. By 8 p.m. hours, Pokrovsk was quiet. The defenders laid down weapons under supervision, their officers methodically cataloging names and ranks before crossing the line. Civilians emerged from basements into still air, blinking against the light. For a few hours, even the guns along the horizon seemed to pause. Operationally, the fall of Pokrovsk redrew the front by barely a few kilometers. Strategically, it marked something deeper. The transition from maneuver to exhaustion, from offensive ambition to attrition. The town became another entry in a ledger measured not in land gained, but in endurance spent. For the soldiers who had held the line, survival was not surrender. It was the continuation of resistance by another means. The choice to live, regroup, and fight again when the line moved next.